Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our 14th episode of Slow Living, a webinar series driven by sustainability rooted in community. Today, it is my pleasure to welcome Corey Odell as our guest speaker. Corey is the Sustainability and Learning and Development Coordinator at Odell Brewing Company in Fort Collins, Colorado. It is one of the oldest craft breweries in Colorado and personally one of my favorites. Odell Brewing has been sustainably conscious and community-driven from the very start. Corey works to bring together all the ideas and efforts of coworkers to minimize natural resource use throughout daily operations. She also heads Odell U, a program that connects coworkers through educational opportunities. On this week's episode, Corey will be giving us insight on all things sustainable at Odell Brewing and how sustainability is about more than just the environment. So for those of you who are tuning in today, we will have a Q&A section at the end of Corey's presentation. If you have a question for Corey at any time during her presentation, please send it in the chat box and I will make sure to call on you to ask once we get to our Q&A portion. So without further ado, Corey, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Let me present my screen. Come on. All right, can you see my notes or my presentation?
I can see your notes right now with your presentation.
Swap that then. All right, is that better?
It looks great.
Great. All right. Well, hello everyone, and thank you for taking the time to hear about sustainability at Odell Brewing. I am Corey Odell, the Sustainability and Learning and Development Coordinator, and today I'm going to briefly go over our history, what we do, and then finish with why we do what we do. So Odell Brewing was founded in 1989 by Doug Odell, his wife Wynn, and his sister Corky. Now, when they started, they never thought that they'd get to where we are today. They just wanted to make good beer. We are now the oldest production craft brewery in Colorado. And 31 years later, we now have over 160 co-owners. And you may notice that I said owners because as of 2015, we are employee owned. And sorry to pause this for a moment. My notes are in a slightly odd spot and I can't quite see them. I've done this without notes, but I was planning on doing it today. Why is this being silly? Okay. Sorry about that. So what do? We make beer. Well, we also now make wine and are soon to come out with hard kombucha, but beer still makes the majority of what we produce. And I guess fermentation is probably the better descriptor of everything that we do. But we're manufacturers, we're making a product, and so that uses a lot of resources. So this slide just kind of gives you a nice overview, I guess, of all the resources that we use. It's a little bit outdated. I haven't updated it in a couple years, but it still gives you a good idea of just the amount that we're looking at. So of course, anything that we can do to reduce that is going to make a big difference in the long run. So some of the ways that we have become more sustainable just are throughout the brewery in general. One of the things that we've done, we installed a new brewhouse, which increases our batch size. We now can do up to 135 barrels per batch. Barrel is 31.5 gallons. And, or just 31 gallons, sorry. And they are, I just wanted to point this out because there is a bit of an economy of scale. As you get larger, you can use less resource to produce your product. So for example, on our 50 barrel system, when we're brewing a batch, we're using more water and cleaning product to process the end cycle than we are on the larger amount, because we'd have to do 2.5 brews to produce the same amount as we are in the larger one. And so as we get larger, there are just automatically ways that we're producing less. So with this new system, we're also just automatically using less grain and fewer hops. But it's on us to actually be making those changes. So everyone who's involved in the brewery is constantly coming up in ways to become more efficient, both in terms of making a better product and to use less resource to do so. So I'm going to talk a little bit about water. This is one of the biggest things that we've focused on in the past, in part because water is a bit of a contentious issue in Colorado, as I'm sure many of you are aware. So we currently use 3.2 gallons of water to produce 1 gallon of beer. Um, and the national average is 5 gallons. So we have halved that almost. Um, Actually, that's not quite, it's a little bit more than half, but still, it's something that we've really been focusing on over the years and something that we really take to heart when we're looking at these changes. It's something that we can be proud of, but of course, there's always more we can do. And just to say what goes into this does include everything that we're using in the brewery, including landscape, our tap room. It's not just what's directly involved with the beer. So one of our biggest water changing projects was on our bottling line. Um, we modified it to use water 3 times instead of wasting it each time. So the first, our vacuum pump pulls oxygen out of the bottles and it gets warm. Oh, I should also mention we want that because oxygen is bad for beer in the long run. But it gets hot, so we take cold city water to cool it down, and then that hot but still clean water goes to rinse the inside of the bottles, then the outside after they've been filled and capped. And that one change when we installed it saved us 1.25 million gallons of water, or about 13% of our total water usage in that year alone. It also was very quick. It only took a couple days to install. Didn't cost very much. It actually paid itself back within that year. And it's something that we can share with other craft breweries who have a similar line. Bell's Brewery is one example of a brewery that is put in a similar system. On to electricity. That's kind of our next frontier. We're going to be looking more closely into ways that we can save electricity. It's a little more difficult to see when you're wasting it. And you can't just ramp it down. A machine needs all or none. You can't use proportionally less. But we do use renewable energy. So we have 11,000 square feet of solar panels on our roof, which supply us about 4% of our total electricity usage. We're looking into getting more so we can produce it ourselves. And for a number of years, we have purchased wind energy that has been produced locally. Unfortunately, this year we did have to cut it because it does cost a little bit more, and we wanted to look at a way that we could cut something other than jobs. So I'm looking forward to purchasing it again next year. But as I mentioned, this is something that we've been supporting for a number of years. So technically, in a normal year, 100% of our electricity is renewably produced. In terms of our waste, one of the easiest things to get rid of is our grain and hop waste. It goes to feed local dairy cows. It's a great protein source for them. It's mixed with alfalfa. That's why it looks not like actual grain in that picture, but it is them actually eating it. And if we're looking at that, we're at 100% zero landfill. It makes up a big proportion of our total waste. But if we're looking at everything else, the things that we are dealing with in-house, we do work to minimize the amount of material that's coming into the brewery, but there's only so much we can do in a lot of cases since we are trying to move product and not a lot of people are on the same page. So the most control we have is what we can deal with in-house. And we work with a couple of different companies. Waste Not is one of them. It's a local company that's able to take a lot of materials that are not normally able to be recycled, like our Mylar hop bags. They're a mix between aluminum and plastic, so traditionally very difficult to recycle. But Waste Not is able to find a source for that. So at the end of 2019, we have finished with 70% zero waste, and our goal is to get to 100% for this type of waste, not including the grain. You may notice I don't have a year there. We have had to push that back a couple of times for a couple of different reasons, and I can go into that more if you're interested. Later, of course. And then we also have a sustainability committee. So that brings together co-owners from different departments, and we can discuss ideas, educate ourselves. This year we were planning on going on a bunch of tours of facilities, but hopefully we'll be able to push that off to next year or whenever it will work for us to actually do that. But the intention is, I'm a coordinator. I'm not the one who's coming up with all the ideas. I work with my committee. I work with the people that work with us to come up with ideas of what we can be doing to change that. or to change our usage, I guess. So everything that I've talked about up until now has been what most people traditionally think about sustainability: reduce, reuse, recycle, being green, saving the environment, and those are great. And more companies need to focus on these areas and those reasons, I suppose, for being sustainable, but that's not the whole picture of what it means to be sustainable. Another piece of the puzzle is community. We are very proud to be a Fort Collins brewery, and we love being in Fort Collins. It's a beautiful community. We currently donate $2 for every barrel of beer we produce. Last year, we produced 130,000 barrels. We also, as through a different format, donate 10% of our taproom sales to seasonal partners. And what I mean by that is we have a nonprofit that we focus on for 3 months and really give them a nice outlet to showcase what they're working on to our audience, and give them a nice portion of our sales as well. So something that we hope is actually going to be a good change for them in the long run. And these are just a handful of nonprofits that we have supported over the years. These are just the ones that popped into my head when I was putting the slide together. We've worked with a lot. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we give and how we choose these nonprofits. So we have 3 areas of giving. We provide support and resources to children at risk, single parent families, and the elderly. We support organizations that promote learning and education for underserved communities, and organizations that help protect and preserve our environment. And then we also have Odell Outreach. So this is a different way of connecting with our community. This involves our fans and our co-owners as well, to get together and involved in hands-on projects like river cleanups, native plant planting, erosion mitigation up the Poudre Canyon, so on and so forth. We usually end up doing outdoor projects because we end up with a lot of participants, and we really need something that is big to tackle. River cleanup has been one of our very consistent ones. We did have one this year, got pushed back, of course. And of course, we had to limit it to far fewer people than normal, but it's still something that we focus on a lot. And then team builds. So that is a paid work day each day, 1 day each year, for our coworkers to volunteer and get to interact with each other in a non-work environment. So you get everyone from finance to packaging to taproom all together, which is really fun. So now let's look internally. As I mentioned, we have over 160 coworkers. We also have 5 separate buildings, 3 different products, and sales reps in all of our different markets. So how do we keep people connected? I mentioned the team builds. We also have a Friday afternoon club where we patronize one of our accounts and gather and have snacks and drinks, and it's pretty fun. We also do quarterly big picture meetings. So that's where we are meeting to discuss what's going on a larger scale. So our finances, sales, new project or products that are coming out. And for 2 of those, we do fly in our out-of-state folks so that they can physically be here. We also have our holiday party where we bring everyone and their spouses together so we can interact in a different way. And as you may notice, a lot of these are things that are physically bringing us together. So unfortunately, we've not been able to do a lot of them this year. Our big picture meetings have been virtual. So we've been working on different ways to keep connected, like virtual happy hours and coffee chats. So different times of the day, we'll have an opportunity for different people to come together to just, talk about whatever. It doesn't need to be anything work related. It's just catching up with each other, which is really nice. Sorry, I wanted to make sure I wasn't skipping something on that. And then we get to co-owner education. So this is the second piece of my job, the learning and development. So we have Odell U, the Odell University, which is where we work to educate our co-owners on everything else that's happening in the business. As we get larger, it becomes easier to become disconnected from everyone else and what's actually happening on the ground. So we've hosted a couple classes, one on Odell history and how we brew beer. And then in the spring, we're going to be doing one on how to get a beer into market. Then we also do a bunch of tasting things. Our winemaker, Travis, has recorded sessions on the history and tasting of each of our wines. because most of us are more into beer, and so we're not as familiar. So this was a great way for us to learn more about our new products. We also have a quality lab that has done classes on how to taste beer and the ingredients in it. And then next year, I would like to start training for those who are interested in beer styles like Cicerone, which is like wine sommelier, or BJCP, the Beer Judge Certification Program, where you can judge beers in competitions, homebrew and professional, or if you just want to learn how to taste different styles in general. And then we have our talent and inclusion coordinator, Andrew, who has put together a couple of different talks on respectful discussion on current events, unconscious bias, and equality versus equity. Because our most important piece of what makes us sustainable, I guess, is our people. So Dugman and Corky have said many times over that we wouldn't be where we are today without everyone along the way. A company is more than just its owners. It's about more than just making a profit. It's about bringing in people with new ideas, diverse backgrounds, different tastes, and so on and so forth to create something powerful and everlasting. So just to kind of sum up, sustainability is about more than sustaining the environment, I guess. It's about sustaining that culture and the people that are who we are. And outside of our coworkers as well, into our community, Fort Collins and beyond, everywhere that we distribute our product. So that's all I have. Thank you, everyone. And I look forward to everyone's questions.
Well, thank you, Corey, for an incredible insight into Odell Brewing, the history, and what you're doing in the state and age. I personally have always loved Odell. As a Fort Collins native, I might be biased, but you guys do instill that culture that everybody thrives for within a business and a product. To start off the Q&A section, I just wanted to start off asking you a few questions of my own. So with your new wine product, from a sustainability standpoint, do you think it's more feasible to brew beer or to ferment wine?
Well, that is a good question. There are a lot of things that play into it. So if you're looking at the raw ingredients to begin with, malt is a lot easier to grow than wine grapes. And we can purchase malt that's actually grown in Colorado and Idaho, which are closer than the Pacific Northwest, where we get our grapes. But of course, we're getting our hops from there as well. So there's a little bit of complexity to that. But then when you're looking at the processing, wine grapes, you only process them once a year, and it's just one product, and then you ferment it, you let it sit. So there's less water involved with that and electricity because you don't have to as actively be dealing with it. But in terms of turnover, beer is so much faster. You have a product in a couple weeks versus months or years. So I guess beer would probably be the best just for being able to maintain a large product at once, but wine overall.
Okay, is that a personal preference? Are you more of a wine fan or a beer fan?
Oh,
I'm just kidding.
no, I do prefer beer to wine.
Okay. Well, that kind of segues my other question from more of a water standpoint, because obviously brewing is so water intensive. And has Odell Brewing looked into hydroelectric for any of your off water usage?
We have considered that. We haven't found anything that would really produce a lot since we are using so much. It would be a much larger investment, and we haven't really looked into it at this point.
Okay. Okay. I appreciate that transparency. So to wrap up things, I actually want to ask you this big question, just the overall picture. So in your vision for the company's future, what do you hope to accomplish with Odell Brewing in terms of sustainability down the line as more of a progression in the industry itself?
Well, I guess my overall goal would just be to make it a well-oiled machine so that everyone is on I already have it to that point where everyone is pretty much on the same page and working towards the same goal. But, it can get lost depending on what's going on. Like this year, sustainability definitely took a back burner, which is totally understandable. We want to focus on the comfort and health of our coworkers first. But at some point, I would love it if it was just second nature. It was just something that we weren't really thinking about. It's just something that we do. Right now, I definitely have to drive things a lot more, but that's just one piece of it. Also, craft beer is really, um, I don't know, we talk about things a lot. We meet together a lot. We're not really secretive of anything other than our recipes. So I guess I'd just like to see craft in general continue to move forward in the sustainable sector as we have been, and just keep more connection as we keep moving forward so that we can, learn from each other. We have very similar processes, very similar products. So I feel like there's a lot of growth that we can have there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, going off of your point about us being in the era of COVID and feasibility, that's one of the main reasons that we've seen a steady increase in single-use plastics is the sterilization. And obviously, everybody has to take their health into consideration. So it's a
Hmm.
big topic in
Yeah.
this date and age. And so I actually see two more questions coming in. I will actually unmute Mark and allow him to ask his question. So Mark, you should be unmuted and you're more than welcome to ask your question.
Sure, thanks. Great presentation. I'm curious with the change of administration that we think is happening, on the U.S. level here. Do you think that there's going to be greater support for small businesses and products such as yours, as it relates primarily to producing it in a sustainable way?
I sincerely hope so. That's definitely our goal, and we do work closely with organizations that are trying to move forward that sort of thing. The I guess, sustainable way for small businesses to uh, be around, be sustainable, so that we don't have to close down if something else happens in the future. And so that is definitely something that I really hope will happen with our new administration, and that's something that we're going to be pushing for. As we are a slightly larger business, we're still small, but we do have a little bit more power than some of our other business or small local businesses. So we will definitely be working to push that forward as much as we can as well.
Yeah, that sounds great, Corey. I think one of the things that you might think about, since you have more leverage, is maybe on the organizational side, right? To make
Mhm.
the point to maybe local, and then maybe more US based platforms that really pushes on this, because I think what you're doing is super smart. And you've got these interests in doing an even better job. And I
Mhm.
think that renewable resources, in terms of energy and so forth, is going to be probably out there as being supported. And maybe there's a way to get involved with it in a more economical, in a more economical way.
Certainly.
Well, Mark, I appreciate the question. And thank you, Corey, for your answer. We're going to move on to the next question we have from Ellen. And Ellen, you're unmuted and you're able to ask your question now.
It's actually Hayden, but yeah.
Oh,
Oh.
hi, Hayden.
Sorry, we're watching together. It was kind of a question for the both of us, but you're just curious if you have like good resources for education for your customers about your sustainability practices, as well as do you find that as kind of an edge in selling your product, or is that something that buyers are looking for and find interesting?
Yeah, well, so really the only resource that we have available is what's on our website. We don't have a lot of information that we post outside of that. And then as for our marketing of sustainability, that's something we've struggled with for years because we don't want to make it look like we're doing it just so that we do have something to talk about. That is something that we actually came from a, we should be doing this, we don't need to be talking about it standpoint. And we realized, there is some marketability there. So we're trying to find a way to walk that line. One of the ways we've kind of been looking at that was a campaign that was, of course, supposed to have a lot more traction this year, but make it pretty. And so it focused on one of our beers, Sip and Pretty, and then focused on our sustainability and our focus, I guess, on water with water cleanups in all the different states that we're in. So we wanted local cleanups to occur around the same time so that we could all be doing good in the environment together. And as a part of that, we were going to showcase some of our water saving efforts that we're doing internally and things that we're working on with others in our community as well. So it obviously didn't go quite as we had hoped this year, because it seemed like a bad time to be talking about gathering together to be making change like that. So I'm hoping next year we'll be able to do something like that again. But that's really the biggest way we've marketed ourselves in terms of being sustainable, other than my, talking to people like you and other organizations, students and classes. I guess that's really the way we've been getting our word out more.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Great question. Thank you, Hayden and Ellen. And so we are at the end of our webinar time. Corey, is there anything you'd like to conclude?
I guess I just want to go back to what Mark was talking about. You should be supporting your local businesses, especially the ones that are doing good for the community, for their people, and the environment. All of those things are good. And for other local businesses, we should all be working together to make this world better, I guess.
No, absolutely. And obviously shopping local reduces emissions and supports the local economy. So there's so many factors that are positive within that realm. Corey, can't thank you enough for being here today and sharing your insight and your experience. Everybody else, thank you for being here this afternoon as well and listening to Corey present. So everybody, have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks so much for tuning in. Respect your mother and respect each other. Have a great rest of your evening. Thanks.
Thank you.